What is resistance, and how does it keep us from living the life we're meant to live? How do you describe who you are now?
I'm a servant of the Muse. I'm a believer in a higher dimension of reality where stories come from. It's something that's not conscious that we need to make conscious. There is this negative force in the world that stands between where we are now doing whatever it is we're doing and whatever the higher level is, whatever our true calling is. I think we're all being bombarded with ideas all the time, but most of us dismiss them right away. But I think some of us over the years have trained ourselves when the idea comes to take it seriously. You know how an actor calls their body and their voice their instrument, right? Same thing with a writer or a dancer or anything like that. So now it's about how can I hone my instrument, believe in it, find a way to financially support it so I can actually do my work. Then you have found your calling and you're doing it.
Stephen.
Michael.
It feels like a real treat to have you here. And, be careful what you wish for because of my appreciation for your work and how you've shaped ideas and where you come from is so rich and so honest. Part of me is hoping that that's not burst in our conversation. And the other half is like, I just can't wait to better understand how you
Thanks,
use.
Mike. Thanks for having me. And like I just was saying before it started rolling, I'm very impressed with anybody that can put together an outfit and an organization and actually have more people instead of, I'm just one person in a room by myself, So my hat's off to you for all the stuff that you've done.
Oh, thank you.
Particularly this new venture here.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. You know what I thought we would do is start with, like I was saying, is that your ideas, the place that they come from is as important as the idea. So I'm like split between two. I want to understand how you express your ideas, but I wanted to maybe start with something more concrete, which is share a couple quotes that just sing, at the high table of insight. And I'd love to start with that and just kind of see where you go with them.
Okay.
Can we do that? Okay, good. So the first one I have here is, and this is one that I think you are really well known for, but most of us have two lives, the life we live and the unlived life within us. Between those two stands resistance. Most of us have two lives, the life we live and the unlived life within us. Oh.
So putting it, let's say, in concrete terms as, let's say somebody is working as an advertising copywriter, and that's the life they live. The unlived life within them may very well be to be a movie maker or be a novelist or something like that. And the question is, as you know, I'm sure you've dealt with many, many times, what stops them? And I'm really talking about myself, what stopped me from doing what I want to do. And it's that force that I call resistance with a capital R, that there is this negative force in the world that stands between where we are now doing whatever it is we're doing, wasting our lives usually, and whatever the higher level is, whatever our true calling is, to find that and then to be able to overcome procrastination, self-doubt, fear, perfectionism, all the other things that kind of stand between us. So that's what I mean by that.
Before we go into resistance with a capital R and what that means and how to work with it and what you've learned by the N of one, you being honest with yourself about how this works, I do want to start with almost a throwaway comment that you just said, which was, a wasted life. And I'm also interested in, when I read it, my take on that insight is it wasn't so much about roles, but I feel that is one of the greatest fears I have in my life. What lies dormant will not be properly understood, expressed, brought to the light because of, let's call it resistance, or let's call it fear, or let's call it fill in the blanks, lots of different reasons. That journey to bring that forward takes incredible honesty and courage and bravery and commitment. And incredibly uncommon to do that. So the life wasted was a jumping off point for me to share that piece. And I think maybe the place to go with us is like, how do you know this? How did you get to this insight?
I actually have a memoir that's called Government Cheese. And it's my sort of my history, my story as an evolution as a writer. The short version of it is I just worked a lot of jobs, banged my head in the wall many times, and sort of groped my way from, if this is where I was trying to get to, of being over here to over here to over here to here, and finally sort of, through, I don't know, probably 40 years of trying, finally sort of hitting the slot that where I felt like, this is what I should have been doing all along. The question one might ask is, well, why didn't you go straight to that? And because I didn't know, and I didn't have the courage to get there, even if I had known. And also, sometimes it takes, those 10,000 hours to get to the place where you can do whatever it is that your calling is.
It took you, what was the age of your first novel that you released?
I was 52.
Yeah. That, to me, when I hear that, I'm really inspired by that. I think you probably bring a lot of hope for people.
When I say that to people, I hope I'm bringing them hope,
Yeah.
Because most people that I say that to are like 38 years old and they're ready to blow their brains out because they're not getting anywhere. And I just say, come on, 38 is your child, you haven't even begun.
And what emotion do you feel as you're just talking about releasing something at the age of 52 and all the work that came and, the struggle to get to that place? What is the emotion?
You mean what emotion did I experience then?
Right now, as you're saying it.
Well, I feel proud of myself that I finally did it, and I hope that it inspires other people.
Yeah, that's really cool. So just for clarity too, what do you mean by an unlived life? What materially does that mean to you?
Let's see, maybe an example. Let's say that you're a young woman and a girl, a teenager, younger than that, and you have a passion for playing the piano. And your dream was to be a concert pianist. You go to college, you meet a guy, you fall in love. Next thing you know, you have 2 children. Your husband goes to medical school. You will need to support him or take care of the family. And so the idea of being a pianist gets put on the back burner. And you say to yourself all the things that we say to ourselves. Well, it was a dream. It'll never come true, blah, 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 blah. That's the unlived life. And fortunately for somebody like that, they at least know what it is. But for most of us, we don't even know what our calling is or what we were put on the earth to do. That, that's how we sort of grope. We're groping toward that on our hero's journey or whatever you want to call it. So that's the unlived life to me. I sort of, an analogy I use to myself is the idea of that there's an underground river that flows through all of us. And we had it at birth, if not before birth. And what we're trying to do in this life, I think, is find that river. What is it and how can we let it flow? Because if we don't live it out, it goes into malignant, it doesn't go away. And I'm sure you would agree with this from performance work and stuff like that and the things you've done with Pete Carroll and all the other stuff we were talking about. So that's
what a great
that
image.
Underground river is the unlived life to me.
Okay, so the underground is the unlived. Then your job is to be on the current of that unlived, like to be on the river,
to get in touch with that river and to let it flow.
So you said most people don't quite even realize or don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly didn't forever. Yeah.
So you're just chipping away, groping. Yeah.
I mean, nobody teaches you this in school, which they certainly ought to.
Are we talking about knowing your purpose?
Yeah.
Okay. And what have you sorted out in a way to help people or for you to better know your purpose?
We're all familiar, I know, with the concept of the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell and C.G. Jung and all that. And I think that we all have many of these kind of hero's journeys. And the hero's journey to me is about finding that calling, where it starts in the ordinary world, you cross the threshold, you enter the extraordinary world, you have adventures, you meet allies and enemies and blah, 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 blah. And theoretically, at the end of the hero's journey, if it all works out, you find what it is that you were meant to do. I'm a dancer. I'm a singer. I was put on this planet to be a source of inspiration to others or to heal, whatever, And at that point, you move into a second journey. This is my theory anyway, that I call the artist journey. And at that point, your life becomes very simple. And it's really about, like, if you're a writer, let's say, and you get to that point where you go, okay, I am a writer. This is what I was put on the planet to do. Then you start to ask yourself, well, can I swear on this thing?
Oh, yeah.
What the fuck what am I supposed to write? Yeah. What voice am I supposed to be in? What's my subject matter? That kind of thing. And then your life really becomes about, how an actor calls their body and their voice their instrument, right? Same thing with a writer or a dancer or anything like that. So now it's about, how can I hone my instrument, believe in it, find a way to financially support it so I can actually do my work. And then you have found your calling and you're doing it.
Okay. So this river,
which it seems like you're doing right now here in this new venture.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing it up, because it feels like I'm in that slipstream, that I'm on the river. And for me, the river really, the calling or my purpose is to help people live in the present moment more often. And you say, well,
that's a great purpose, that's an art, right? That's above and beyond an art. So that's great.
Yeah. I feel like it's the canvas is the human experience, and the tools are words. And so language is my art, and I base that art on the science of psychology. But the science is not enough. But it is the foundational colors that I'm using for this canvas. And the work to know what the river was is hard work. To know what the river is difficult work. And I was thinking, like, when I said, the reason I use past tense is because the work I did to find that was very, very hard. How does one find the river?
Let me interrupt you, Mike.
Sure.
Why was it hard? And what was the nature of the difficulty?
Early on for me, I love this, Stephen. We're going to go back and forth on these things, right? So first it was like, I want to make some money. Okay. Then it was like, wait, no, I want experience in life. And I didn't know how to square those two, because the experience in life that I was navigating toward had nothing to do with money. I was going to travel the world and surf the world and live very Spartan, if you will. And I thought, God, that's kind of selfish. Like that's not quite it. And then I thought through, like, what am I going to do with these tensions that are at odds with each other? And then I found this beautiful science of psychology. So I just kept going. I had no idea how I was going to use it. And so it was just this time chipping away, groping is the word, chipping away at this big marble block that I didn't have this grand vision that there was a David inside of it. I didn't have that. I just kept chipping. And all of a sudden it was like, whoa, it's got to be this. This is what's true for me to live the great life, is to be in the present moment more often. It changed me. And so then I said, I want to share. That's how it happened. So I wish I had a faster process, because it took me 40 years, 40 some years. That's too long. Like, I don't know how much longer I'm going to live. Maybe I'm
pretty
going
healthy to me, Mike.
Yeah, things are pretty good, but we don't know. We don't know how this thing goes,
sure don't. Yeah.
But
so what was the actual difficulty? Was it self-doubt along the way, or just the sort of sense of not really knowing where you were going?
So are you asking what was the resistance?
What was the difficulty? So maybe you said it was really hard.
Yeah, the hard part was me not listening to myself and listening to others. So first was my family, what they thought. Then it was, kind of my friend group. And it was my wife and her family. And, it was not listening to myself was the hard part. And then I think it takes an appreciation for some cold air on your skin to be true to yourself. And so I wasn't ready to have cold air on my skin. You know, it's obvious that you're a learner. Where does this curiosity about how I work or how others work, where does that come from for you?
It just seems like a natural thing to be curious, you know, 'cause, I mean, I have my own journey that I'm on and my own struggles that I'm on. And so when I meet somebody like you that's sort of on a parallel path, but it's quite different.
Right.
I'm curious, you know, were your struggles the same as mine? You know, is there some commonality there, and can I learn anything from it? And
so
just curiosity.
Let's share struggles. Like, what are the struggles that you're trying to sort out now or working through? And
that's a great question. I mean, one of my big struggles now is that I'm at an advanced enough age that the wisdom that's floating in the air, the expectations that are floating in the air are that my body should start falling apart and I should start falling apart, you know?
Yeah, right.
And so one of my big challenges now is to counter program myself against that, you know, and say, this is bullshit. I'm not going to listen to that, et cetera. And so far it's been really good for me, because the great thing about being a writer is you always have, theoretically, at least another book coming or another project coming. And the enthusiasm that you have for that kind of keeps you going and makes everything fresh, because, you know, that underground river keeps flowing and you're like a leaf that's floating along on it.
This underground river, it's so good. I wonder if your curiosity is kind of at the center of who you are, like this exploratory, curious human, and it's always been that way? Or is this something that you've stepped into?
I think I've always been curious, but I think everybody's curious.
You know, I got made fun of when I was younger for, want to hear it?
For being curious?
For asking too many fucking questions.
Yeah, but I mean, kids always ask questions, right? They ask really, you know, they're really a pain in the ass, you know, but they're naturally curious, you know?
Yeah, and this was by my friends. Like, come on, man, give me a break. Like, stop asking so many damn questions. And they would, like, I was really curious. And then it didn't kind of bode well in the surf world that I was in. So I feel like there's a coming back home to my curiosity that I had to, at some point I shed it, I abandoned it. I thought that I could do better for the approval of others, and that this wasn't the right way to do it, and it was a pain in the ass. And I'm wondering if you think, in your experience, if it's kind of a human condition to be curious.
I mean, I do. I think that's, you could probably make a case that that's what makes us human, you know, but I mean, animals are very curious as well, right? Puppies, some mice, they're all, you know, sniffing around trying to figure out what's going on.
What's going on.
But I think humans are naturally curious, right? It's an evolutionary thing. The more you know, where am I? You know, where can I find water? Where can I find a mate? You know, what's the danger? Why is the sunset so beautiful? That kind of thing.
I got asked, it was by a, what was his, I think it was a Monsignor in a Catholic church. And I was peppering him with questions about God. And he kind of stopped, and he had it with me. You know,
How old were you at this time?
I think I was like 17 or 18. And it was over dinner. And he kind of looked at me with the right amount of respect and regard. And he says, I want you to really think about this question I'm going to ask you. Is God inside the sunset, or is the sunset inside of God?
That's a hell of a question.
It's a hell of a question. It's a really good question.
And why did he ask you that at that particular time? And
because I was asking questions, like I was really curious going after, like, what is this God thing? Like, okay, so you've dedicated your whole life to it. What, I can't see it. I can't smell it. He goes, yeah, you can. You're just not choosing to right now. And so it was like that kind of like thing. And then, does it exist was the question. Does God exist? And so he stopped and he looked at me and says, you have to figure something out. He says, I think God is all things that are true, beautiful, and amazing. I said, okay. And he says, and then he asked the question, is God inside a sunset, or is a sunset inside of God?
And did you answer that to your own satisfaction or to his?
I just looked at him and it was like, good question.
Okay.
Yeah, good question.
Huh.
Yeah. When I asked that question, I'll share my insight on it. But when I asked that question to you, how do you frame it? Like, how would your initial response be?
That's a great one. I mean, to me, I don't really know how I would define what God is.
That's
a
the
hell of a
first, you got
question.
to
Certainly, there are
operationalize
a
that.
lot of planets and galaxies out there that have their own version of a sunset. So we're just looking at one of those
them.
things, But it is sort of a great question, really sort of like, what is beauty is really kind of what that's about. Why does beauty move us? And I don't know what that is. All I know is it seems to be, if God is in anything, it's beauty, right?
Yeah.
But what is beauty for? Is it for what, sometimes I know I'm rambling on here, but it's easy to look at this world that we live in, this material world, as a form of hell. And to say that we've been punished and this is why we're here. At the same time, it's incredibly beautiful. So you look at a sunset, how can you think there's anything wrong with this?
Yeah.
And I've never been able to figure out what the difference is.
Yeah, I've got an insight of yours on purpose that I want to get to, but this idea of, what are we doing here? You're talking about, in a very eloquent way, knowing the river and being on the slipstream of the river that with it from within. And I think it's like that. The metaphor is awesome. My answer, before I go to your next insight, my answer is it's both. To be a pain in the ass to the reductionist, it's both. Beauty is. And when you're true, beautiful, and amazing, when you're in the presence of something beautiful, there's a feeling of awe. And then that is truthful. And so, I've come to appreciate more the experience of beauty that happens in the unfolding, unpredictable present moment. And if I'm anxious, and if I'm irritated, and if I haven't slept well, or if I've been eating foods that are kind of screwing up with my insulin and sugar regulation, and I'm just kind of deregulated or dysregulated, I find it very difficult to be here. And so then I miss all of the beauty that the world has to present. So that's how I get down with that idea. But you had also, before I go to this next insight of yours, you said that writers always have another book inside them. That's how surfers think too.
Another wave is coming?
Yeah. And so my job is to be ready, to be prepared, to be ready, to capture, to seize, to be part of this unfolding moment that is always brand new. Every wave is brand new. And so the job for a great surfer is to be properly tuned to the present moment. Again, I'm coming back to the present moment so that we can capture the next, I don't know, for a writer, the next stringing together of words in a clever way to yourself or a meaningful way to yourself. So I think we vibe together on that. Yeah. Okay. So we didn't really hit on resistance. So before I go to the next insight, can we talk about resistance with a capital R? What that is, because you said there's a dark force. You didn't say that word. You said a
negative force.
Negative force. Are you using that in a spiritualist frame? Or like, what is this force that we're talking about?
Well, it's like that quote comes from my book, The War of Art. And one of the things that it says in the book is, if you've ever bought a treadmill and taken it home and find it gathering dust in the attic, then you know what resistance is, right? Resistance is that force that keeps us from getting on the treadmill, that keeps us from doing what we know we should be doing, and what is our connecting with our underground river, whatever that is. So there does seems to be this natural force in life that's trying to stop us from being who we were meant to be. Sometimes I say resistance is the devil, and I think that it is in a way. It isn't only a positive force in this world. There's negative forces, right? There's, because we see many friends who are casualties of life, right? And I feel myself that I'm fighting a war constantly, and I'm kind of amazed that I haven't become a casualty yet. And what are we casualties of? We're casualties of that force, that force that stops us from following our dreams and makes us settle for some crappy version, the life we live as opposed to the unlived life within us. I'm sort of amazed that nobody ever taught me about this force, you know? And when I first wrote about it in The War of Art, I thought, well, I'm the only one that feels this. I must be crazy. I just going to put it out there. But since then, I mean, like thousands of people have written to me and saying, you know, thanks for giving a name to this thing that I feel too. It's like you're writing my life. So that's what resistance is to me.
Yoda talked about it.
Does he?
The force.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so you're onto this light and dark, evil and good, you know, you're onto the duality piece here about this energy. And I think a psychologist would say, I'm acting like I don't know what a psychologist would say because that's my training. But I think that I would say, okay, hold on. Aren't we just talking about negative self-talk? Aren't we talking about a critical voice? And there's no force that's created it. Rather, it's a set of responses to earlier conditions that at one point were very adaptive. I don't think I can do that.
I would disagree with that.
Yeah. And now they become maladaptive. So the first adaptive was, let's say that I tried something and then everybody laughed. And I was the one that felt naked and everyone's pointing and laughing. And then of course I'm going to have a conversation with myself about what's happening. And I say, oh, this isn't good. This doesn't feel good. Wow. Okay. Don't try that again. Or remember this moment because let's protect ourselves from this happening again. And that's really the beginnings or the origin story of a critical or negative voice. And when lots of those happen throughout life, you know, we can become pessimistic or critical or anxious or depressed. And you say, no, it's not a force. You say I'm sorry. You say, no, it's not that. It's a force. So is that like I don't know, there's a spaceship out there or there's a being or there's a, you know, keep going. Like open this up. Because I can't extend the metaphor much further.
If you want to get into it deep, here's my theory on what that resistance is. If we think of, this will be in psychological terms, if we think of the Jungian self that includes the collective unconscious, archetypes of the unconscious, intuition, dreams, all of those forces that are beyond conscious thought, right? The big self. And somewhere in the middle of that self is this little thing called the ego that is, you know, our conscious mind, our reasoning mind, so on and so forth. Let's say we're trying to be an artist and we live in the ego because that's what we're taught, right?
Identity.
Our identity, you know, our conscious, our I, right?
My body, my thoughts.
Right. My death, my fear, et cetera, et cetera. And we realize as artists, as dancers or whatever it is, that if we're going to get to a real source of inspiration, we have to get to the self. We have to get to our intuitions, our dreams, or the underground river. The reason I say underground is because it's unconscious to us. When we start to move from the ego to the self, which is, when we start to make that move as an artist or whatever, then the ego resists us. Because if we go to the self, we're putting the ego out of business, right? And I'm sure this is a religious experience as well. You know, although I don't put it in those terms, I'm sure that enlightenment, whatever that is a form of going of releasing the ego and identifying with the greater self or with God, whatever, right? So the ego puts up resistance to that. And the way it does that is it takes the form of negative self-talk. And I'm not denying that we all have that maladaptive thing, whether it's our parents, our teachers, or whatever it is. But my thesis of this whole thing is that what I call resistance goes way beyond that. We're born with it, and it is a negative force like gravity. It just exists in the world. That's my take on it. I think even the most highly evolved, the Dalai Lama, whoever you want to be, will still experience it. The greatest artist, you know, in the world, whoever it is, will still wake up in the morning and have to fight that, you know, slay that same dragon every day, even though they may have overcome all the maladaptive voices in their head. That's my thesis, anyway.
Really interesting. Yeah.
Because for me, it never goes away. And I think I've kind of gotten beyond a bunch of stuff.
So one of the things I wanted to pull the conversation toward is the war piece of your philosophy. And I really respect what you've written. And I wanted to be provocative again in saying, like, are you sure it's a war? And before you answer that, I'm on record saying, when I meditate, sometimes it feels like a standing civil war within inside myself. Like, it's hard. And sometimes it is, I'm in the slipstream. It's amazing. I'm not sure where time exists. Like, I'm completely with the unfolding experience, and it's amazing. So I resonate with the standing internal civil war. I'm not sure that is the highest way of me thinking about my relationship with myself, my relationship with experience. And so I understand resistance. And I think that it is a function of how brave I can be to speak what I believe to be honestly. And that requires incredible vulnerability. And it requires, for me at least, people to see that and recognize that before piling on and disagreeing. So I just want to ask you, like I've always wanted to ask you, like, are you sure it's a war?
It certainly is to me.
Yeah.
I mean, life is a battle. Every day is a battle, in my opinion. Now, I don't think that's the highest form of thinking about it.
So we're
I
seeing
think
this
it's kind of
it's
another way to think about, let's say, the artist's struggle. One way you could think about that is to say that the artist, the inner world, the war of art, calls upon the virtues of a warrior, right? Courage to keep going, selflessness, the willing embrace of adversity, that kind of thing. But another way you could think about it, that's a higher way of thinking about it, is it's like being a mother, in the sense that if we're talking about an artist now, but also anybody that's an entrepreneur or following a vision of any kind, that there's a new life inside us that we are carrying. If we think of the mother metaphor, right, which I'm thinking is higher than the warrior metaphor. And because a mother is also like a warrior, in that a mother will give her life for her child, will, lift a Buick off of her child, run into a burning building for her child.
Do whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes, right? A mother is a supreme warrior, if you think of it that way.
Cool.
But that's a much more of a nurturing, giving,
it's a tenderness,
maternal thing, So that would be kind of, and I'm sure there are levels a lot higher than that of thinking of it, metaphors.
Yeah.
The holy man or woman, or, some kind of a spiritual thing. But for me, in the real world of my day, it's a battle. And that's how I see it.
Yeah. I get afraid that
that you don't get past that and into a kind of a flow at a certain point.
Right.
But the initial kind of jumping into the cold pool, that's a battle.
I agree. And I'm glad we had this conversation, because the way that we frame things materially shapes the experience that ensues.
Yeah.
So if, for example, this is just a conversation we're having internally here at Finding Mastery, is change hard? And I said, if we create the position that change is hard, then it always will be. And that word always is not that provocative, because if the fundamental statement is that change is hard, then when I'm experiencing change, thereby it's hard. And hold on, everything is always changing. So now I am framing swimming upstream to the actual nature of life. All cells, all things, all matter, everything is always changing. So if change is hard, then why frame it that way? Why not say change is? And then my job is to be tuned with and accepting the unfolding nature of change. And if I can be in that slipstream, that mindset, that framing, I don't know if I can let go of the warrior. Like, there's a warrior in me because I'm trying to get to a truth warrior. There's like trying to get to the truth of something. Man, that's hard. That part is hard. And I wonder if I can just be more mothering, more nurturing to myself in that way. Yeah.
Well, you're definitely aiming at a higher metaphor than I am, Mike. I would say change is art.
Yeah.
It's not that you're framing it or one is framing it that way. I mean, it is.
When you changed from your old shoes to your new shoes, was that hard?
How do you mean by old and new shoes?
Well, when your old shoes are worn out and let's be dramatic.
Ah.
And the toes are exposed and the laces are worn out and it doesn't fit anymore. And then you're going to change to a new pair of shoes. Is that hard?
No.
No. Yeah.
No.
So not all change is hard. It's the way that you frame it, like, oh my God. And those new shoes, your new boots, are stiff and they're maybe a little uncomfortable, but it's welcomed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, frostbite or stiffness. I'll take stiffness in my shoe, and I just think that how we frame things is really important. And that's why I love how your mind works, because you captured my experience in the high art of living, which is that there is a struggle, there is a resistance, and there is an internal war that is taking place to get to the high art. And so when I say high art of life, where do you go with that idea? What is the high art of life for you?
It's probably a lot like what you're talking about of being in the moment.
Yeah.
It is sort of like I know when we get in our own way, we're in our own ego, we're thinking bad thoughts, and we're not, that we all sense that this isn't what we were born to do. Something's wrong. We're not vibrating at the right frequency. And so the high art, I would think, would be getting in touch with that underground river, however you want to, or a form of flow or whatever it is, getting out of the ego and into the self, getting into some kind of, must be when you're surfing, I would imagine. I'm not a surfer.
Yeah, I think I'm actually here with you now in it as well. It's not just for certain activities.
In a conversation.
Yeah. I feel like that's where I get to spend most of my time. So I want to be able to have it now, not just surfing. Do you find it mostly in writing, or can you find it in other ways as well?
No, I find it in other things as well.
You do.
Writing to me, I think, is sort of the truest form to my underground river.
What if,
for instance,
okay,
5 or 6 weeks ago or something, I taught a course. I did like a 1-day course, and it worked. People,
what was it on?
It was about writing. It was about some of the stuff we're talking about.
Very cool.
About resistance, about underground river flow, that kind of stuff. It worked. People got something out of it. I've gotten a lot of good feedback out of that, but it wasn't really me. The idea of teaching that, for whatever reason, wasn't really my central thing. It was too easy. It's much more what I was put here to do, I think, when I'm sitting at a keyboard and I'm in my imagination trying to, and I'll say more writing fiction than writing books like The War of Art.
Yeah. The famous movie about Bagger Vance, what a breakout that was. Yeah. I
didn't like the movie very much. I didn't have anything to do with the movie, but I do like the book.
That's interesting to me. Yeah. What did the movie miss?
What did it miss?
Yeah.
A lot. I understand. I worked as a screenwriter for a bunch of years, so I know that when you adapt a book, a lot has to be cut. And I know that the screenwriter and the director had to, pick, what they thought was going to work visually on it, and they had to jettison things that they didn't think was going to work. And maybe I would have made the same choices that they made. But there was so much in the book that wasn't in the movie that I was frustrated when I saw it.
What made you write a book about a golfer who returns from World War I, and lost their purpose? And why that narrative?
First of all, I'm definitely, as I know you know, I'm a believer in the Muse, and I believe that you get, ideas come to you and you don't know where they're coming from. And it's not really a conscious decision. Oh, I want to write, this thing, for this particular reason. In that case, I was just seized with that idea. And I can go into, do you want me to go into more detail about this, Mike?
I would love it for the lesson that is embedded in here, which is how to be available to being seized by an idea and then having the courage to follow that and working through the resistance to express it. If we can create that arc in this, I think it's a brilliant, maybe one of the most important arcs of our conversation so far.
Well, you're familiar, I know, with the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita.
Oh, yeah.
And now for those who might be listening here who are not, I basically
one of the great
fell
texts.
in love with that
one of the great texts
structure.
Yeah.
And stole it. And the Bagger Vance is just a kind of a knockoff of that Hindu scripture. So it really wasn't about a guy from World War I. That was
Krishna.
Secondary. The Bhagavad Gita is a story that it takes place in ancient India, very short. I highly recommend it. And in the story, two armies are lined up across from each other, chariots, spearmen, bowmen, that kind of thing. And we are with the great warrior Arjuna and his charioteer, who happens to be Krishna, in other words, God in human form.
Yeah.
And Arjuna, the great warrior, looks across to the other warriors, and he's close enough that he can see their faces, and he recognizes kinsmen and teachers, and he says to his charioteer, "Drive my chariot out between the two armies and stop." And what he does out there is he lays down his weapons and he says, "Nothing good can come of this fight, of killing these people. I'm not going to fight." So Krishna, i.e. God, says to him, "Stand up, take your weapons, fight. You will not be slaying the enemy because I have slain them all already." And then he goes into this really condensed treatise of spiritualism from the Hindu tradition. And it deals with karma, yoga, previous lives, duality, non-duality. It even gets into like quantum mechanics. There's a section in there called the field and the knower. So it's really deep shit, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I just thought, let me steal this, and instead of a troubled warrior, I'll make him a troubled golfer. And instead of his charioteer, I'll make him his caddy. And what was really interesting to me about that, and I know I'm rambling on, but I want to say this.
Keep rolling, Stephen. Yeah.
Is that when God appears in human form, it seems to me in Scripture, and I'm thinking of Jesus, he does not come at the head of armies or as a king or carrying gold. He comes as a servant. Like as Jesus was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And the same thing is, it's a great truth to that, even though I don't know exactly what it means. So Krishna, God, appears as a charioteer. He's like the servant of Arjuna. And the idea of a caddy and a golfer sort of really fit into that with me, you know, where the caddy seems to be this guy that's just carrying a bag, but yet he's a dispenser of wisdom. So anyway, that's where the idea came from.
Awesome.
And,
awesome.
But beyond that, I was just seized with it and just felt like I got to do this. And I thought at the time, this is the dumbest idea I've ever had. It's not commercial. It's a really a mystical golf thing. I thought this is going nowhere. But I just was seized with it and had to do it. And to my amazement, it actually found a bit of an audience.
Oh, a huge audience.
But I never thought that it was had any real appeal. I was amazed when it did.
Book is great. Movie was really fun. I don't know when it came out. Maybe it was like 15, 20 years ago, something
yeah,
like that.
2000 or something like that. Yeah,
24 years ago. My son and I watched it. Like, thank you. Like 3 times over. You know, it's really fun.
Thank Robert Redford.
Yeah, nice job there. And, you know, like it reminds me though that the battle is not outside of us. The battle is within us. It sometimes looks like there's an external battle between Arjuna and the kinfolk across, but it really is the battle, do I go or not go? Do I listen to this charioteer? Do I listen to this other voice that is whispering in my ear or not? Do I listen to the truth that I feel or not? You know, do I say what I believe, even in the face of great risk and peril of the rejection of others or not? And so I feel like the real battle is always internal.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, the names that are given to the warriors on the other side, when they're translated supposedly in Sanskrit, they're names like selfishness, that kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
The actual vices that we have. But it strikes me, Mike, that what we're talking about here in a way is the human being was kind of designed to be a tribal being, right? We evolved as tribal creatures where the opinion of others, of our fellows, was very important, right? Because if we couldn't be counted upon to fight the mastodon, the tribe kicks us out and we're dead, right? But now the world that you and I are living now, it has made individualism possible. So now we're sort of cut free for self-actualization, self-realization. In other words, who am I really? What is my real voice? Which is, contrasting with, or is competing with the idea of the opinion of others, right? That's what you're talking about. How to free yourself from the expectations of the tribe, whatever that is. But those old habits or that conditioning is all we have as human beings.
200 to 300,000 years of conditioning, brain wiring to be tuned specifically for that threat. And I would add to it that I think that we are tribal. I agree. It feels to me like we are more like a coral reef, and we need a harmony.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, a harmony. So a living coral reef has lots of. It's an alive ecosystem that is multidimensional, and we need each other. So this is not about freeing from the coral reef, but being a meaningful contributor to it.
Well, that's a great metaphor. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, it's not about like, let me rise above what the brain and the tribe wants from me, but it is how to be in harmony with the river. I'll use your analogy, to be in the river to my very best ability, because when I can do that, when I bring those gifts and those experiences forward, we're all better for it. And so to me, the self-help industry makes me nauseous because it's not about like, for me to be better. It's for me to be better for what aim? To be a good partner, to be a good teammate, to be a good tribal member, to be a good member of this ecosystem of the coral life. So, we are social beings.
Sort of at the top of like the Maslow pyramid here, where we're fortunate enough in the moment that we can do that, that we have the affluence and
That's right.
We're not at war or that kind of thing.
Well,
you remember,
did
you ever see the movie Dr. Zhivago or read the book?
No.
You know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, it starred Omar Sharif and Julie Christie. It's probably anyway, there's a scene in it where Dr. Zhivago, it takes place in the Russian Revolution during, the teens, the 19 teens. And Dr. Zhivago is this poet, this great poet that is beloved. And at some point in the story, the white Russians are fighting the Russians, the communists are fighting this and that and the other. It's total war there. And he gets captured by one of the great generals on the other side that he happened to know, and in an earlier life. And the guy says to the warrior says to him, or Zhivago asks him, "What do you think about poetry?" And he says, I should find your poems absurdly personal. This is Tom Courtenay is the actor. And Dr. Zhivago's really personal. What do you mean by that? And too personal. And the warrior says, the personal life is dead in Russia, Zhivago. History has killed it. And I remember a chill. It came over me right now when I said that we're at the top of the pyramid now being able to talk about this stuff. But God forbid if the shit hits the fan, we find ourselves down, and we think to ourselves, wow, how great it was that for a while we had a chance to pursue self-actualization, self-realization, and now we're just on the street trying to survive.
Oh boy. Yeah. I can feel a radical pull to the middle. And I'm not sure that
politically, you mean?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. No, I was saying a pull to the middle of being part of a pack. And because the middle of the pack is belonging, let's call it, and there's safety in that. But I don't think the middle of the pack right now is healthy. I don't think our society is healthy. I think that we're really struggling, and I'm just speaking about the West right now. We are obsessed with performance, and our identities are wrapped into what we do and how well we do it, rather than being attuned to the river. rather than being tuned to the purpose of what we're doing on this crazy spinning rock and this body somehow we inhabited with these made up words we're using to communicate. Like, what are we really doing here? And that work feels some of the high art for the human experience, or a rite of passage to be an adult, is to know what are you going to do with your time here. And if we don't know what that is, we get whipped around by the world around us, and they will tell us what they want from us. They will tell us, do this, look that, say this, make this money, abandon your dreams to be able to, they will tell us that. And so there's a radicalness in me that is like, we can't keep doing this. We need the brave ones like you to show us and to remind us,
Well, that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, come on, man.
To help
people.
Yeah.
So before we move on, there's one other piece. Can you speak to the listener who says, you're making me sad. I'm feeling sadness because I wanted to be a dancer. And I was good. And I gave it up. And I left early. And I didn't really get to express that art. You could say, well, sure, you could keep dancing. But the ambition or the dream was to dance at the highest level, and they left too early. And I could fill that narrative in from dance to surfing to fill in the blanks. When there's a physical nature to it, you have the luxury of you're getting better with age probably. As the wine is opening up, you're having more interesting life experiences to draw on, a better command of language, a truer sense of
writing
who you
is
want
good
to
that
be.
way, as opposed to surfing or pro basketball. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you speak to those that the thing that they loved doing or wanted to do that felt like there was their river, they were on it, they got off of it for whatever reason, and that river now has passed?
Well, that's a hell of a question.
Yeah.
Like, this is sort of the dilemma of the professional athlete that has retired, right? Michael Jordan, Brett Favre, you could go to, or the warrior, the member of the SEAL team that has retired from that. How are you ever going to match that adrenaline rush, the camaraderie, and all that sort of thing? It's a hell of a challenge, and very few people. I mean, Tom Brady is sort of in it right now, where he's becoming a broadcaster, and he's part owner of the Raiders now. So, and Michael Jordan is doing his NASCAR thing, and that kind of thing. So, but I do believe that there's always, the underground river is still flowing. If we look at it as a challenge, okay, I can't dance anymore, but there's something there's something maybe adjacent to that, maybe completely different from that will fill that. But that's the hard work. But there's something there for sure, because the river keeps flowing, but it's hard to find it. That's the internal work that you're trying to help people latch onto.
I think the actual craft, dance, writing, is immaterial. It's the thing that if we're not careful, we say, I feel free when I write, when I play the guitar, when I'm in conversation with others. If I could just do that more, life would be great. And I say, no, it's easy for you to feel a certain way when you're doing that. But can you bring that sense of ease, full connection to everything you're doing? And that would be part of mastering self and mastering life, which is to be at home with yourself everywhere you are. And I think it's a cool thing to say, it happens. There's something special when I can command my mind with language to tell a story and it feels right. Awesome. What a miss, though, if that's the only place you can be alive. What if, I'm saying, Stephen, what if you were a miserable person every breakfast, lunch, and dinner with your partner because you're not writing or you're not writing well? That would be a pretty deep consequence.
And yet there's a lot of reality to that too,
When you're not writing well, what is it like
Tom
for you?
Petty said, the waiting is the hardest part, right? But then there's another sort of aspect to this, which is that if we think about the archetypes of the unconscious and how we evolve through life from one archetype to another, and we start out as the virgin or the seeker or whatever, and maybe at a certain point we are in the warrior archetype that a pro athlete would be in, or a warrior or something like that. And then we evolve beyond that into the father or the mother, the mentor, the teacher, and finally into sort of the king archetype, the queen archetype, and then the sage and the mystic. So if we as a dancer maybe past our physical dancing prime, maybe the next archetype is still in the flow of dancing, but might be more of mentor or teacher or support or something like that. Or it might be that in, like a player, a pro athlete becomes a coach or something like that. Or maybe it's a whole other dimension, a whole other thing that they go to. Or like you say, maybe it's in general a whole life, just a whole being in the moment type of thing, mastery of life that doesn't, as you say, isn't tied down to any specific activity. But there certainly is another phase that sad dancer can find one way or another.
Yeah, you create space for opportunities, for options in your thinking. And you've done a lot. You've been bartender, oil field worker, like driver. You've done inhabited a lot of roles. So those are many of the things that you've done over your arc. How do you describe who you are now?
I'm a servant of the Muse. That's my definition of my occupation. That I'm a believer in a higher dimension of reality, that where stories come from and creative ideas come from, and it's really the same as that underground river. It's something that's not conscious that we need to make conscious. And my job, I see it, is just to do whatever the goddess wants me to do, whatever the next assignment is. That's my job to do it.
How do you tap into that place? What do you do to ready yourself to be available, to be tuned?
It is another analogy that I use is the idea of the cosmic radio station, that the goddess or the muse or the higher dimension, or whatever it is broadcasting. This is kind of what Rick Rubin talks about, what he calls source, right? Which I would say is like the 50,000 watt transmission tower, and I'm trying to kind of tune in to that radio, and it comes to you. I think we're all being bombarded with ideas all the time, but most of us dismiss them right away. Like in the shower or riding down the freeway or something, we'll have an idea for something. Oh, what if I did that? Or it's I'm sure this happens to you all the time, but most people dismiss those ideas as they come in. But I think some of us over the years have trained ourselves to tune into that radio when the idea comes, to take it seriously, and write it down or record it or something, and then think about it a little later and test it out again and come back to it again. And maybe 6 months from now you go, that was a pretty damn good idea that happened when maybe that's what. So I'm always on the lookout for whatever the next thing will be.
Oh, very cool. I think in terms of signal to noise ratio. And so similar. That's an engineering term, right? It's also a psychological term, that the signal is always available. If I'm clouded with the noise, I can't get to the signal.
Yeah, there's a lot of noise too.
There's a lot of noise.
Yeah.
So my job, psychologically speaking, is to be tuned to the signal. So I have to quiet my mind.
That's great. Yeah.
What do you do to quiet your mind to get to the signal?
I don't meditate or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I'm, in moments like when you're driving is a good one for me, where my mind becomes open there. I'm just I've got a little mechanical task to do, and ideas will come to me then. Or in the moments between waking and sleeping, that's another big one for me. A lot of times the goddess comes at night, and I'll wake up with a thought and, grab my phone and, write it, type it, put it down.
Yeah. Somehow. So that's, both of those are probably involved in what's called the theta brain state.
Is that what that is?
Yeah. So delta's deep sleep, which is slow brain waves. What rests right on top of that is just a little bit faster, but still slow, is theta brain waves. And then it goes alpha, beta, gamma.
This is the science you're talking about.
This is the science. Yeah. So theta brainwave is this sleepy, creative, ADD type of thing that is also involved in flow state in one way. But So it sounds like the mechanical job of driving and that's in between,
Yeah.
you know.
Also for me, dreams are a big thing. I'm a big believer in, recording your dreams and trying to interpret them as best you can.
Do you wake up and write them?
I
Or
do.
do you
I
write
don't
them
know.
as
I
soon
record them
as?
into like my phone.
So when you come from a dream, is it first thing in the morning you say, oh, it was this and
No,
this?
I'll
and
get up at the actual time because I'll forget it,
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. And then do you ever, so we can predict when I don't know if you do this or not, but we can relatively well predict when a dreaming cycle might be. And then you could interrupt yourself just after, let's call it the third dream cycle, and like wake up and go, did it happen? Damn it, I just interrupted my sleep for nothing. It didn't happen, or like, yes.
In
Like,
other words,
oh,
there's a technique to do that, huh?
yeah. Yeah. So every 90 minutes is kind of when the
Oh, really?
cycles begin. And then the longer third and fourth cycle is probably the most interesting place that you find available dreaming.
Cool.
Yeah, I know, it's cool. Yeah. Not that you want to purposely disrupt your sleep, but that's a technique. All right. So, okay, look, this is so good. One more quote here I have for you. Our job in this life is not to shape ourselves into some ideal we imagine who we ought to be, but to find out who we already are and become it. So that is, for me, your positioning that we already are everything that we are. It's already inside of us. It's already there. And it's not something that we need to grow into, but rather it's available right now. Is that how you meant it?
Yes. Like, I'm definitely a believer. Well, I don't have kids, as I was telling you before, but I know from all the kids that I see that they pop into this world with their own personality right away, right? If you have 3 kids, your daughter is already what she was at, 6 months old, right? And the same thing with puppies and kittens, right? They kind of come into the world with their own sort of personality and their own, one loves to dance, one is an athlete, whatever, that kind of thing. And this idea sort of came out of the writing of The Legend of Bagger Vance, the idea of the authentic swing. And this is absolutely true in golf, that a player can basically, when Tiger Woods first swung a club at 2 years old, and we have film of this and everything, you look at it now, you go, oh, that's a swing. And you know who Jim Furyk is?
No.
Or
Oh, yes.
Freddie Couples.
Yes.
These are guys with very distinctive swings. They didn't get to the swing by thinking about it or trying. They just had it. It just popped out. It came. Or if you've ever seen identical twins take up golf, they swing completely different from day one. Wildly different. And yet they're made of the same DNA. So that was sort of the metaphor for me. The authentic swing equals the authentic self. And I believe that, like that Wordsworth poem where we come into this life not naked, but trailing clouds of glory do we come from God, who is our home. The idea that we've come into this life already with a calling, a personality, bad things too, pain from previous things, guilt, maybe crimes that we had, and that we don't come in as blank slates that we can, just write anything we want on it. We are already who we are, and our job. And then, like you were talking about conditioning and what your parents say, your parents always tell you, well, I want you to do this or do that, or the church tells you this or this. But our real job is to find out, who are we really? What do you really love? What is really calling to you? And Robert Greene says that. I'm a fan of his. So that's what I mean by that. Our job is to find out who we are already and then be that.
It's really rich.
I think it's absolutely true.
Yeah. One of my first principles is that everything that you need is already inside you, meaning that you are already whole. There's nothing that you need from another person to be completely yourself. Now, to be part of the fabric of the coral reef, we need a relationship with each other. And the essence of that relationship starts with your relationship of yourself. And if you feel that you need something outside of you to be okay, We're starting in a pretty corrupt way. Yeah. So
Is this kind of the stuff that you worked with Pete Carroll about when you were with the
yeah,
Seahawks?
that would be infused in there.
Uh-huh.
I mean, the essence of that work is to help, and I haven't talked about it in this way, publicly at least, but to help identify what makes somebody really special. What is this unique, special thing that just you can bring to this world? It's your unique spark and essence. Let's uncover it. And once we uncover it, let's celebrate it.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we uncover it and celebrate it, let's imagine what it would be like to be more tuned to that.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's agree of what a compelling future could be. And then in partnership, let's hold each other to the standard required for you to be at home with yourself over time, especially when most people would struggle to do that. Call it pressure or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be so extraordinarily committed to that specialness coming forward on a consistent basis. Wouldn't that be fun?
Mm.
And the athletes tend to be like, yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, that's what I want.
Uh-huh.
So, all right, well, and so that's kind of the promise that I would make to an athlete, or Coach Carroll would make to an athlete, and I would make that promise to him and he would hold it to me. And so, it is through that relationship of identifying that really unique specialness and bringing it forward, and then having the mental skills to be able to stay true to that, even when the world has great intensity or stress or pressure around it.
So you and I are sort of really doing the same kind of work, just from different angles.
Imagine now.
Different vocabularies.
What if we were to do something together? Okay. There's another book in you somewhere in there. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Well, like I said to you before, I've always been fascinated by that work that you guys were doing.
Oh yeah.
What exactly it was. I had no clue.
Yeah.
But it certainly worked.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, nothing that in the human experience is perfect. There's all types of, challenges that we had, but I think the premise of it was really special. And we expressed it in a really, 2 Super Bowls in 2 years, winning one in dramatic fashion and losing one in dramatic fashion was an incredible professor of like a teacher of how the human condition works.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. Look, I could go on and on with you. I've enjoyed every morsel of this conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, this has been great fun, Mike. So if you ever want to do this again, we'll take another crack at it.
I would love to do that with you. And where's the most meaningful place that people can be connected to your work?
I'm on Instagram, just under my name, Stephen / whatever they call that.
Yes.
_ Pressfield. And I have a website that's just my name, and my books are on Amazon or
wherever you can find them.
Books are sold.
What's the new book coming? What are you working on now?
Believe it or not, I've got like 4 already done. But I have a recurring character. I'll do this very short because I know it's boring as hell. I have a recurring character in my fiction, a guy named Telamon of Arcadia, who's like the one-man killing machine of the ancient world, like the Clint Eastwood of the ancient world. And I've done 2 books about him, one called A Man at Arms and another one following that. So that's what I've been working on now.
Beautiful.
So set in the ancient world.
When do we anticipate?
A Man at Arms is out right now. Came out like a year and a half ago. And the next one is with my agent now. So we'll see where that goes.
9 months, 12 months for the next one?
Yeah, a year and a half, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So from the time.
Let me say one other thing. I do have one. I have one thing I can actually pitch.
Yeah.
I do have a book out right now. It's a great book for Christmas called The Daily Pressfield. And it's really...
of course. Yes. Keep going. This is great.
It's sort of a compilation of my stuff that we've been talking about, but in a 365-day, like a devotional, day 1, day 2, day 3, so that each one is just 1 page long, each chapter, so that if you have a friend or you yourself are a writer, an artist of any kind, starting on a long project that you sort of need a little guidance, or encouragement along the way, this book, The Daily Pressfield, takes you day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and it's kind of, it's heavily into the battle metaphor, the resistance metaphor of keeping your head together when facing your demons every day. So that's That's out there right now, the Daily Pressfield.
Well done, mate. Well done. I appreciate this time and your body of work, and I'm excited about what's next for you.
All right. Well, thanks, Mike. And I'm excited about what you're doing here.
Yeah.
This is amazing, little operation you've got going here. I want to see where it goes.
Yeah,
and,
man.
We'll keep in touch and we'll do this again.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you.
Great.
Come on.